Not everyone's Christmas means enjoying sleigh bells, twinkly fairy lights and candlelit Christmas Eve services. While many may be caroling and raising a glass of good cheer, the Christmas season can be a very difficult time for those who are grieving. Today I'm talking to Odele Harding, who serves on staff at Central Church Edinburgh. For many years, Central have offered a Blue Christmas service, a reflective gathering for those who aren't feeling the joy of Christmas. In our conversation, we'll learn a bit more about the Bereavement Journey, an 8-session course created by the charity Solace that you could run in your church. Together, we explore how bereavement support can be part of the ministry of the church all through the year, while offering a safe place in our language and celebrations for those who are finding it tricky. Hello, welcome Odele to the Roots for Churches podcast. It's great to have you here.
Oh, it's great to be here, Melanie.
Great. Well, we're approaching Christmas, and for many people, Christmas is about family. It's about connecting with loved ones. Obviously, it's about worshipping Jesus. And Christmas can be particularly hard if you have been through a bereavement, maybe recently or even, many years ago. Christmas triggers all those memories of family and friends and gatherings. And so we want to talk about how do we sensitively engage with bereavement over Christmas. And I think your church has become Centre of Excellence for that. So I'd love to hear some of the story of how your church supports those who are bereaved over Christmas.
Yeah, absolutely. So on to the senior team staff about 5 years ago now. And part of my responsibility was to oversee pastoral care. And I recognized that we had done some stuff really well, but there's always room for improvement. And so what I wanted to do is to really come to some of the staff and some of our community leaders and others to gather information and to find out we were kind of at that. And as a part of that, our staff members just really brought some helpful challenge about the whole issue of bereavement and how do we help people when they're grieving and how do we support them and how do we be sensitive, not just at Christmas, but throughout the year. So we went on a journey really, and I really encouraged her to veer and press into that and see what was available. And as a part of that, she came across the Bereavement Journey course and that material. And so after she took some time to look at that and to go on the training and came back and kind of shared that with me, really felt that actually it's going to be quite an important thing to do. And so we went on a journey of starting that and training up volunteers using the Atlas training, and up to date we have now run 8 courses, and so we always keep them deliberately quite small, but we have seen just under 50 people who have done that and done those courses now. But alongside that, at the same time, we really kind of think about our Christmas gatherings. And as you said, Melanie, particularly that could be a time that does really trigger stuff, whether it is a very recent bereavement or is a historical one. And so this same staff member who has actually moved on from us this year, she once again said, I wonder if we become more intentional in not just speaking into that sensitively in all of our gatherings, maybe providing an intentional space where we have one of our Christmas gatherings in our Christmas program that is actually exclusively as we use the language to help people to understand this is a space that you can come to if you are not okay at Christmas time. We have called that Blue Christmas, and we've given explanation about that. Sometimes we've used the language of the fact that this is a reflective space, this is a safe space, and we intentionally have then built the components of that gathering so that people can access that regardless of how they are feeling at Christmas time.
So there's no sort of need to come and paste on a smile and sing the jolly songs. So tell me more about a Blue Christmas service. What goes on? What's different?
Yeah, definitely. So you'll have to forgive me because we use the word gatherings here, but essentially I mean service. Probably just slip into that jargon. But we have done, and we try to keep it very sensitive. We try to make sure that throughout the whole of that gathering, that's kind of taken into consideration. So that comes through the songs that we choose, the style of worship that we use, through speaking and giving a kind of part of that. We deliberately try to have that to maybe than some of our others. And we also try to make sure that there is a time of response to reflect, also from the beginning to really say, if you are not feeling okay, and this brings about emotion, you are welcome to, just sit in this space and engage. But if actually that is too hard for you to do, we're very fortunate where we are that we have a designated prayer room. And so we do make sure that that is available for people if they want to go to that. What we have seen over the years of doing it is we do have people that come who are maybe bereaved. And so actually their grief is just really painful, and they're coming because this feels like a safe space. And so we want to make sure that they are able to lament, they are able to be honest and be real. And so we use that language in how we frame our gathering. We're also very gifted to have a number of creative people within our church family. So we've used them and their giftings in different ways. So this year, I've just been liaising with somebody who writes poetry, and she is going to be writing a bespoke poem. The title of our Blue Christmas this year is Finding Peace. And so she's going to be writing a poem as a part of that. And what we're going to do this year is we're going to get that printed onto a card and put on everybody's seat for them to take away with them so that they can continue to reflect upon that. We really try to prayerfully and sensitively weave that into all the elements of that gathering. And people have been really encouraging in that and have said that they found that really helpful. And a particular person who was a part of our church family was very honest about the fact that they found Christmas really difficult because of their battle with mental health and depression. And they said that they found that gathering an absolute lifeline and felt that the church were really responding to the realities that they face.
That's really good. And do you find that the people who attend are predominantly members of your church who would come anyway? Or does this service appeal to people more generally across the city, people who might not normally come to church, but think actually that's something for me?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a mix. There's people within our church family. There's also people who have maybe been on our Bereavement Journey course. So what we usually do is we run them twice a year, in the spring and in the autumn. And then obviously when they're doing it in the autumn, we would then give them one of our Christmas flyers that has all of the information on there. This year, sadly, we haven't been able to do an autumn course because this staff member, John, at the beginning of, at Easter. But our hope is to do one in the spring. So we will hopefully have the dates for that and have the flyers to advertise the Bereavement Journey at the Blue Christmas Reflective Gathering this year. But we also do encourage, so we've got a counselling service at the church, and so we encourage our counsellors at the counselling service to share about it with those that are coming through for counselling. Once again, that counselling service is made up of a real mix of people, some within the church family, but also externally. And we do have links with churches in the city who know that we intentionally have this type of gathering at Christmas and intentionally have this space. And so I know that some people do signpost those to come to that. And then alongside that, because of the way we do things at Central, we have a number of missional communities that are doing things in different ways across our city, scattered across our city. And so we encourage them to maybe invite or encourage, if they've actually been journeying with somebody, both faith and no faith, to come along to that. And once again, we would also advertise it through some of our care ministries. So we have a cafe that runs here twice a week. We have something called a soul food meal, which is a community meal for people that wouldn't get a meal otherwise in the city. And we also have a parish nurse and a CAP debt centre. And so those spaces as well to invite and encourage. So we do see a real mix of people coming to that.
And you're a city centre church in Edinburgh. I imagine, there's sort of a shopfront element of like people know of the church, and just seeing that advertised, I think that idea of Blue Christmas, I mean, it's the Elvis song, isn't it, as well?
Yeah.
But people kind of intuitively understand that Christmas can be hard and that here's a way I might be able to connect. So the naming of it, I think, is quite helpful, because even if you're not from a Christian background, you kind of immediately understand, oh, that's what that's about, and that might be good. When do you time it? Is it quite close to Christmas, or do you do it earlier in December?
So we usually feature it in the middle. Usually try to do it before we have our kind of carols by candlelight. So we deliberately do that. I guess prioritize it, and to recognize that actually people who are going to find Christmas hard need to have a space to be able to start to think about that and process that and go on a journey of that to prepare themselves for Christmas and what Christmas may bring. And so we would usually try to do it at the beginning or at the middle. We usually do it in an evening, and we deliberately have it as an evening gathering because we recognize that for some people, they are a parent, and in the morning at our all-age gathering, they would be supporting their children, or they're naturally, maybe this is a space for them. And yet we also do say, if you do have children, young people, we try to make sure that it's a space that's for that. But we felt that the evening gathering time slot is a better option for this style of gathering.
No, that's really helpful. So you mentioned that bereavement is something that you're trying to be sensitive to in all of your gatherings throughout the year, not just Christmas. What does that look like? How does that sort of sensitivity come through in your wording or the things that you do?
I think one of the things that we have really been on a journey, and I guess really tried to prioritize at Central, is the language that we use. We're quite intentional about the language that we use and how that lands, how that makes people feel. And so we, as I said earlier, we want to always make sure that we're preparing people. So that's why we would give a trigger warning if something we were going to say really was going to kind of trigger somebody, whether it's related to bereavement, whether it's related to, abusive behavior, whatever it may be. We would try and give that if somebody was using a personal story in their kind of sermon illustration, particularly. I think the other thing is that what we try to do is we always want to be real at Central. We want people to come, whatever stage they are at in their faith journey. We want to be really accessible and welcoming to all. And so we do recognize and speak into that at the beginning of our gatherings. Sometimes, our host may just say simple things like, none of us know what week you have had this week, whether it has been good or whether it's been challenging. But we believe that God does see it all and knows it all. And so we invite you to come and be real in this space today. So we try and do it in that way, so that also being sensitive to all the different kind of needs that would be going on. But we have definitely tried to prioritize being really intentional in our language. And particularly with we would have like a rolling slide of different visuals that would come up on our screen, advertising things, reminding people about the services that we offer and provide, the ministries that are available. And so as a part of that as well, we would remind people of our prayer space and how people can access things. And then we would also always have available for prayer ministry at the end of our gatherings in both the morning and the evening. And so once again, whatever has come out of that time of teaching, we would encourage people to respond, but it may well be that people just need to go for somebody to pray with them. And so once again, we're intentional in our language. We would always say, we've got a prayer ministry team available. They're not going to ask you lots of questions. They're not going to counsel you. They just want to be able to pray for you and bless you and support you. And all of our prayer ministry team are trained in how to do that and how to do that well. So those are some of the ways that we try to make sure that it features throughout. And if there are times where somebody in our church family died, or there has been a traumatic or tragic event, then we try to really sensitively as well acknowledge that, speak into that, and prayerfully respond.
That's interesting. So how has your church kind of come? I know it's sort of good practice, and I hope people listening to this podcast will think, well, we should think about bereavement. There's nothing more certain than death.
Yeah.
It happens to all of us. And the church should be a place that can really walk with people through that. But your church has really formalized this or turned this into a ministry. And what started this? What sort of was the catalyst to the church taking on bereavement in such a significant way?
I think it was a couple of things. I think this staff member that I was mentioning, they had their own very sad, tragic loss of a loved one. And it was actually not too long before Christmas. And their experience at that time, they talk about the fact that they just felt very, very numb and actually really obviously questioned their faith and questioned God. And they, through that, wanted to make sure that other people that were going through that were better supported and were better heard and were better, were kind of given that space, I guess. So it definitely came out of some of those personal reflections. But one of the other things I think is at Central, we've tried to be a real permissioning church. So when people have a kind of idea or they feel that Holy Spirit is prompting them to do something, we try to work with them and see how we can enable that to happen. So there were other people who had spoken into this as well. We also have a church family that have been a part of the church for a very long time. They have been in the industry of being funeral directors, and so they have always been closely linked to the church as well. And so all those different conversations when I came into my role and was trying to do a bit of an assessment of pastoral care, what things are we doing well, what things aren't we, then it's really important actually we get better at that. So I guess there wasn't just one main catalyst. It was a combination of things that made us really kind of think, how do we do this and how do we do this well? Obviously, when we went into the time of COVID and Christmas at that time as well, we were fortunate enough because we have a large building to be able to still put on when we could do our Christmas program. Looked very different, but we did have a really wonderful response to that Blue Christmas particularly that year as well. Just recognizing the importance of that and wanting to be real about it. If you can't be real with God, then there's something very wrong, because that's what God says for us to do, to just come to him with everything that's going on. And there's so many examples of that in the Bible, of where people have just laid out exactly how they're feeling, the good, the bad, and the challenges. And so we want to be a place where people can do that and be real with that. And so the bereavement journey has been part of that, and supporting people in bereavement has been a part.
I wonder if culture has something to do with how we grieve. And, you see different cultures around the world that are more demonstrative or more just loud or vocal about grief. The typical, stiff upper lip. You're in Scotland, and the Scottish demeanour is often much less emotionally demonstrative. Let's put it that way. How does the bereavement journey? How have you seen sort of permissioning emotion like that change, and have you come up against sort of cultural obstacles in that?
I actually don't think we have come up with that many cultural obstacles, because I think we are trying to normalize it. We're trying to kind of speak about it more. We definitely in the last 5 years have seen a real change in the demographic of our church, as our care ministries particularly have kind of grown and developed and flourished. So we are a church that is made up of a number of different stages of life, backgrounds. We want to continue to keep doing that and improve the diversity of the church. And so recognizing that, we want to make sure that we're hearing from those different people and we're taking things on board from them. I think as we have spoken into that, as we've also had staff members who have gone through their own difficult, tragic, personal stories. What we always say here, because we do have a staff team, is we need to make sure that we're really helping our staff team to be healthy. And if we don't do that, then our church won't be healthy, our church family wider. And so obviously, because we have had a number of staff who, even in the last few years, have had loved ones, parents who have died, we want to kind of continue to try and normalize that. So people have found that really, really helpful. And actually, one of our staff members who did attend our bereavement journey, they recently, for some stats that we were putting together and some information that we were doing, a annual basis, we have what's known as a Care Sunday. So at our 3 gatherings on that Sunday, we try to highlight what is happening in and through our care ministries. And our bereavement journey would come within that kind of umbrella of ministries. And so we would pick out some quotes and some stats and other bits and pieces to tell the whole of the church family what we have been doing, even if they haven't engaged with it. And one of the staff members who had attended one of our bereavement journeys, they said that they found the bereavement support so helpful. Them, it had actually been a few years since they had lost this person that was really close to them, but they were still processing and dealing with grief. And they said having a space to talk openly about how they were feeling, huge encouragement, and helped with some of the loneliness that they were experiencing. And so I guess that's one of the things that we want to keep trying to do, to make sure that people are not feeling alone and not feeling isolated in this, and that we can continue to support them in that.
That's really helpful. I mean, that's what the church is for. It's community, isn't
Exactly.
it? It's people to walk alongside us. And this is it's like a nice handle in some way that you can say, here's a way for you to connect with the community. Here's a way to be known and supported in your very vulnerable moments. So that's really, really helpful. So if another church was thinking, okay, we should probably do something around bereavement, like what advice would you give? Would you start off with the Blue Christmas? Would you start off with the Bereavement Journey? Where would you begin?
I think I'd probably do both, because what I mean is, to be ready to do a bereavement journey, you've obviously got to have people that do the training. And so actually, if you're thinking about doing the bereavement journey, dependent on, when you want to do it, you need to start to think about it months before, because you need people to be praying into it. You need people to be trained, and you need people to kind of be ready. So I think, dependent on where you're wanting to do that, actually, if you can do it alongside a Blue Christmas, then you're taking church family on the journey of that, but you're also helping people to recognize that this is a space and a place, and there are alternative services that are available as part of that. And so that's why I say what we would have done previously is we would have maybe done a bereavement journey course in the October, and then enable people to come to the Blue Christmas style gathering Christmas time. But this year we haven't been able to do that. And so we're doing it the other way around to some extent, even though we have got of being known as a church that do that. And we do have some people on a waiting list for our spring bereavement journey course. Obviously gone to them to say, we are doing something at Christmas time, which can be a helpful space for you. So I think giving it a go, but explaining it well and taking the church family on the journey of that is probably quite helpful, particularly if you're going to start with doing it at Christmas time. Some people might go, why are we doing this? And so it's important to speak into that, why and how you're doing that. We have a weekly newsletter that goes out to all of our church family. So we spoke about it there, advertising it, kind of taking them on the journey as to what we were doing and why we were doing it. So we're also very, I guess, blessed to have a number of people in the church family who we've been able to draw on them, draw on their expertise or their creativity. But if you don't have that, it doesn't mean you can't do a Blue Christmas, because there's lots of different services and materials, just like Roots have with their liturgies that are available and lectionaries. So there's lots of different things that are out there. I think it's more, if you're going to do it, then it's about explaining the why and the how, and taking people on the journey of that, so that even if your church family decide that actually that's not a gathering that they might come to, they can be praying about it, but also they can think about, is there somebody that I know that would actually really benefit from coming to that space? or potentially going on that course.
So it's a concerted effort to do both together, or just not have an isolated event, but actually to put the whole support around. So you've met these people who are bereaved, or people in your church. Yeah, it's not a one-off event. It's a whole way of doing church and supporting people. And that's really helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
That's really good. So I guess I was just going to say, can you give us kind of a sneak peek into, you sort of talked a little bit about what the Blue Christmas service is like in your church, and there's this poem, but sort of give me a flavour of what it feels like. Is there candlelight? It's in the evening, but what does it look like? How does it feel?
Yeah, well, like I say, we do it slightly differently every year, but this year I have quite a big sanctuary area. So we are we're the old Central Hall, so we do have beautiful building with stunning stained glass windows and other bits and pieces, which does help with trying to maybe create a more contemplative place. And we would usually have candlelight as a part of that. And like I say, with this year, we've actually decided to have something on each of the chairs. People, I think sometimes, particularly if people are coming into a new space, they're not familiar with it, then just being able to maybe pick something up if they've come on their own, it means that they've got something to do with their hands and they're not kind of looking around, and so they can just look and they can read and they can do that. So we're doing this year. All of our welcome team would be reminded in the pre-gathering time of prayer what we're doing in that gathering, the fact that we want them to be really sensitive. So that would mean that as people come in, there's not a big, hi, welcome to Central, recognizing actually that's not the space that we're holding for that gathering. So people would be intentional in that. But also when people then come in and find a space to sit, we would usually have some background music that is sensitive for people as well. We would choose really carefully who our hosts were for that gathering. So once again, we would want somebody who could really minister well to people. Our hosts, as we call them, they're not just hosting a gathering, they're really hosting the space, and they're really hearing and listening to Holy Spirit as to what is it that actually you're saying, and how do we continue, and what is the kind of atmosphere, and how do we really speak into that. So we would be really intentional about that. Similarly with the talk and who's not only delivering that, but also, I think I said earlier, we would make sure that actually wasn't too long. We would want to kind of keep it slightly shorter. Previously, we've done different things, but this year we are going to have a reflective piece of music. We actually, as a church, a number of our worship team wrote some songs that we put out on an EP a few years ago now, and the theme of that was light and lament. And so we are going to hopefully be taking one of those songs, and the band will be playing that as a part of the gathering at some point for people to just be able to sit in that space. And then, as I said, we're going to have our prayer room available, and we're going to have a couple of volunteers who are either a part of our care ministries. So maybe some of our counselling team, or maybe some of our prayer ministry team, they're going to be in that space. So if anybody comes in there and they just want to be able to just be, or they want somebody to pray with them on more of a one-to-one, then that's available to them. And the choice of songs would also be reflective in nature. And yet, I guess what we also want to do is, in terms of finding peace, which is the theme for this year, we want to speak into the fact that we do believe that God can bring peace, bring comfort in these times of pain and in these times of challenge. And so we want to be hopeful in what we say and how we say it, but we also want to be sensitive in how we do that. So we're mulling over, we actually have tea lights that people can actually come up and light as a part of that as well. We did that a few years ago, and we had them in shape of the letters piece. And so then people came up and they lit them, and then we spoke into that at the end. So we're still finalizing some of those last minute bits and pieces, but that is our plan at the moment for that gathering.
It sounds great. I think it is striking that balance, isn't it, of sensitivity and allowing people to be fully themselves emotionally before God, but equally allowing us to meet with God, who is the source of our peace and our hope. And
Absolutely.
we know that death is not the end for Christians. And so, without being glib and trite and rushing the process, and allowing that space for that journey. And I do think it's nice that they talk about the bereavement journey with all of this, that grief is a journey, that's a process, and that we can't rush it. We don't all go through it at the same pace. Some people will be, freshly bereaved, and other people grieving over many, many years, and that it's still valid. And it's not like there's a limit on when you can come to these services, or that it, the journey takes the time that it takes. So I'm really inspired and encouraged that this is available. And I know that there'll be loads of different kinds of churches and people involved listening and thinking, I could do that bit. That's not very much like my church, but I could do that bit, or we could do a flavour that would really work for us. And the church needs all of this, and the people around us need all of it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things what we have, maybe just by chance, it's not being intentional. What we have found is usually when we do our Blue Christmas, it's when some of the other city centre churches do their kind of carols by candlelight, or kind of joy-filled gatherings and services. And so we do have members of our church family that will choose to just go to those because they don't feel like they need to come to the Blue Christmas. And that's absolutely fine. We don't have any problem with that at all, because, that actually is then a helpful space for them if they want to do that.
No, it's good. The church together, we can do it, can't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Odele, for sharing about your church and what you're doing for Blue Christmas. And I do hope it's been helpful to people.
Oh, it's a privilege. Thank you for having me today. Really appreciate it.
As well as weekly content, the Roots website has a wealth of helpful articles to support you in your ministry. For example, supporting bereaved children and signposting to various Blue Christmas and services of remembrance. There are prayers and liturgies you can include for an adult or intergenerational service. Visit rootsforchurches.com/bereavement to find all these resources. Roots provide weekly resources to help you lead great church, from Bible notes and song suggestions to children's and youth sessions. There's a ton of fresh Christmas and Advent resources to inspire you. Head to rootsforchurches.com/Advent-Christmas 2024. Visit rootsforchurches.com to find all these resources and take out a free trial. Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share it. Together, we can grow.